Hi, this is Hillary Baggett with Hill Talks Podcast and Community Bloom, empowering midlife women. My guest today is someone who I not only like, but I also admire. And we only met about 8 months ago. We were in a community design course. And then we just kind of kept the conversation going, and I've learned a lot. Today, we're talking to Iris Kavanagh, and she has founded Women Who Co-work. There's so much to like about Iris, her mission, her life's work, and her value and purpose. And you might hear a child interrupt us, you might hear a dog interrupt us, and it could be on either side. And you know what? It's summertime, and that's what happens, and we're just going to roll with it and not worry about it. So, Iris is a workplace strategist. She's a mindset and resilience coach, and she is really helping co working entrepreneurs and teams. And that's what we're going to talk about. What is co working? How we address the barriers to finding a co working space, how to find the right one that works for us, what you need to know in advance. And she's going to share about her work as a community leader of co working spaces. So she even leads, coaches, other co working leaders. So, this is a fascinating concept to me. I started implementing this 1 week after I met Iris. With my daughter, who was in college, we would set up co working sessions. Some people would call it body doubling, some people call it just co working, where you mute and you get stuff done. So, a big welcome to Iris Kavanagh.
Wow. Thank you so much, Hillary. That was such a lovely introduction. And it's been really fun to meet you. I really love the work that you're doing in the world and so drawn to it as a woman of a certain age, if you will. And I feel that there's so many overlaps in the work that we do at Women Who Co-work in supporting women as entrepreneurs and also women as operators of these community spaces. And so I'm really excited to talk today. I'm excited to offer any support to your community and how they can find communities, additional in-person, in real life communities that allow them to feel fully supported in being just who they are and in becoming even better versions of themselves.
I'm already inspired. I mean, if we just ended there, right? We are both women that are, we're over the age of 40, I can safely say, and we're passionate about that. And we're passionate about reaching out to lift up, build up other women in their careers as entrepreneurs in shared spaces moving forward. The big message is your life is not over because you reach a certain age. Your life is not over because something feels scary and hard. Your life is about to bloom in ways you cannot imagine, and we're just along for the ride. So, this is going to be a really fun time. Are you ready to dig in, Iris?
I am ready to dig in.
Oh, good. Well, first, we're going to just explain to people what is co working.
Yeah. So co-working is the act of intentionally working together independently. And so we think of co-working as a verb. Co-working began in and around 2004 in Canada, in Toronto, with the advent of the Center for Social Innovation, which was started by Tanya Sermon as a way to collect in one space companies that had social innovation in their DNA and in what they do in the world, and as a way to bring them together to collaborate. And then here, where I am in the United States, co-working was brought forth in about 2005 by a man named Brad Newberg, who collected a bunch of people at a feminist collective in San Francisco called the Spiral Muse. And he brought them together to work in this physical space in a way that he termed co-working. And so that's where the original term of the word co-working came from, that experience that Brad brought together. And so both of those have grown into this global both movement and now industry that's centered around creating places of belonging for people, dismantling loneliness, and in the process, providing workspace, providing community, providing the ability for people to, through kinship by proximity, create something bigger than themselves, refresh their own creativity, and collaborate in ways that both enhance their businesses and enhance their personal selves.
Oh, wow. I mean, I do love how our visions and our missions in our work and our life and our communities really do align. I mean, so that people feel less alone. Certainly for the podcast, we want anyone listening to know you're not alone. And when you're working, you're an entrepreneur, you're at home, you can feel so isolated and you don't get that social engagement. You don't get to go out to lunch with coworkers because you're all remote. So I think it's so timely that you and I met during a pandemic in a virtual community on building community. And I so appreciate your passion and commitment to helping people find a place where they belong.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, there's a lot of really great stats out there about what co-working does in the world. And there's a lot of business metrics and things like that around price per square footage and all of those kinds of things. We can also talk about flex work and remote work and, you know, what the pandemic has brought us. The stat that I love to refer to the most, there's actually two. One of them is that people who join co-working spaces, 87% of them who were surveyed in 2017 said that they felt happier since having joined a co-working space. The other piece is that one of the things that keeps people in co-working spaces across the world is the community manager. So those two pieces there speak to the experience of being in that high touch, human touch, in real life or IRL experiential place of co-working. And so it's not about the desks that you're sitting in. It's not about the design of the space. It's about how you feel in that place. And so much of that is about how much humanity is expressed there. And so that's what I'm here in the world to talk about.
Yeah, that is so great. I mean, I just felt a collective sigh. I don't know about the listeners, but when you can have a space that you can feel like you belong and you can be your best self and deliver your best productivity, your best work, your best creativity, all of that comes together and people feel like they come together in community. And that's what these co working spaces are about. Now, a little detail when you and I were in the community class last year, we were talking and I had a question. I said, why do you not have a hyphen in co work? And do you remember your answer?
Oh boy, do I. So this is actually a big one. And I'm just going to preface that answer by saying, you know, we petitioned the AP style book for years to recognize that we don't hyphenate co-working. And it took a very long time, but they actually made a change for us. So that's a pretty remarkable thing. It took about 10 years for that, 10 or 11 years for that petition to be recognized.
Wow.
So, as a global movement, about 12 years ago, we voted as a global movement on how we wanted to handle the word co-working. There were some that hyphenated it, the AP style book hyphenates it, and there are some who didn't hyphenate it. It was originally not a hyphenated word. What we decided is that we like to be together, so we're not going to hyphenate co-working.
Right. And for people like me, sometimes I read words kind of funny and I was like, a cow irking, what is that? And so, it was kind of my bit of silliness of like, sometimes, my eyes just don't work quite right and they don't see things as they're supposed to be, but part of my humanity. And so, but co working, we like being together and we don't want the separation of the hyphen. That's really an important aspect to point out to people of that nothing's going to separate you in that space, and the manager of the co-working space is going to create that environment. And whether it's with or without music, how often are they engaging and interacting? I mean, I bet there are many people out there who have not yet heard of this, so I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce and further the concept so that people can say, hey, I need a co-working space, let me look into that.
I love this. And I do just have to respond to what you just said about cow orking. Because your phone, if you have not typed co-working into your phone very often, then your phone may actually autocorrect to Coworking. Well, after probably 10 years of my phone autocorrecting to Coworking, I decided to Google, what does Coworking mean? And it turns out that it's a thing. Coworking is what happens when a cow is being photographed up close and they decide to put their face right into the lens. And so what you get is this really big cow nose and a farther away cow face. And so that's defined as Coworking. So if you search for co-working on Instagram and you follow that hashtag, you will see a lot of pictures of cows working as well. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
Who knew? That's a bonus. No extra charge to our listeners for learning that cow orking is also a thing. Oh my goodness. Thank you for that enlightenment. I mean, it just keeps getting better. That's what I love about it.
I hope I gave you a little giggle, listeners. I hope so.
That is
Yeah.
great. Well, next, I wanted to maybe talk about the barriers that people maybe face when they're working in isolation and how they can identify that they need a co working environment.
Yes, yes. Such an important question. And, I would have had a different answer for you prior to the pandemic. I'll throw a little bit of that in now. You might be somebody who has a position in a company that allows you to work remotely today. That's about 99% of people who have office jobs in the US. You might also be somebody who is a small business owner, an entrepreneur, a freelancer. You might work for a nonprofit. There might be many reasons that you don't go into an office on a regular basis, and or that you're blessed enough to be able to work from home or work from anywhere. The problem comes in when you need to be working with other people. So you have clients that you need to meet with. You have other team members that you need to meet with. And prior to Zoom, that would have been something that the expectation would be that would happen in person. The ideal scenario would be, in a lot of cases, that happens in person. Well, if you are somebody who runs a business out of your bedroom, that can be really difficult. So where did people turn? Traditionally, they turned to coffee shops to have meetings, to get their, internet cafe Wi-Fi experience while being around other people. Well, coffee shops are great, but they're not made to work out of. So they're noisy. There's no place to meet with people. You technically shouldn't be sitting there all day unless you're buying cup after cup of coffee, which honestly, if you're buying cup after cup of coffee, by the time you've reached 5 hours at $5 to $6 a pop, you could have bought a day pass in a co-working space. Also working from home, you might not see people for 3 days. Maybe you don't shower. Maybe the personal hygiene starts to roll downhill. Maybe you work in a top only for 3 days. Maybe that's super comfortable. Maybe it's not. The flip side of that, if you are, if you're somebody who's able to really block out everything going on around you. The flip side of that is that you're not somebody who's able to block out everything going on around you. And what gets more attention at home is the laundry, the dishes, the kids, the dog, the crying, all of those things. So those are a lot of the barriers to working from home or working remotely. And that is what we often see in co-working is these are the people who enter our spaces, especially in more rural or suburban environments. I'm in a small town. Well, it's not small compared to where I grew up, but it's about 75,000 people here in the city that I live in. And that is who we saw in our co-working space 15 years ago when we opened.
Oh, that is so great. Really good to know and to hear that yes, there's barriers. Here's how you can identify if this will serve you. And then that kind of takes us right into the next question of how does somebody find and select the right co-working space as if there's tons of choices and options out there?
Excellent question. And I do have a visitor here. I just want to let you know. So, so please forgive the interruption here, but I'm co-working from home today with my co-working buddy who's on summer break. So
we understand. If he wants to say hi, he certainly is welcome. So he feels included.
Do you need to pop in here, buddy?
Yeah, can I?
Do you want to say hi?
Yep. Go ahead and get yourself a bagel.
Hi.
Hi. Good question. I liked how you reached quietly to touch mom's shoulder to get her attention, and then you waited, and then you let her know what you need. That's awesome.
Yes, both of my kids have grown up in co-working spaces and have grown up around co-working, so they're very familiar with that. So, Hillary, just to remember, because I do have this menopausal mom brain going on, um, that your question was, how do people locate these spaces? Was that
Well, to know that it's the right
to
one
find
and
the
to
right one?
select
Yeah.
to choose from them, because I think for me, being so new to the idea of co-working, it's like, well, how do I find a space and how do I know that, yes, this is the right one? But I did catch that you had just said that, oh, sometimes you can have just a day pass to find out if that's a nice fit for you.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay. So, one of the best ways to know if a co working space is right for you is to try it. I recommend that you do a search in your community for co working and then you see what pops up. Some people are going to want a space that is really quiet. Some people are going to want a space that is community oriented and collaborative and has a pretty hip vibe going on. Some people are going to want a space that has certain amenities. Other people are going to want to have a space that's dedicated to women only or to writers only. So it really depends on what your needs are, and you need to understand your own working style and your own needs in order to understand that. So that would be the first step I would say, is to identify what you're looking for. Now, if you don't necessarily know what you're looking for, then skip right over to step number 2. After you've searched, go ahead and book some tours. So that looks like you're heading over to the co-working space. The community manager is going to meet you and they're going to show you around. And in the showing you around, they should also be introducing you to the community in different ways. And if they're not introducing you to the community in different ways, that is a sign that, they might not be the right community for you. So pay attention to how you feel when you're on that tour with that community manager. That community manager is a golden business resource for you in an environment where community is the most important thing in that space. And that the reason for that is that that person is the computer algorithm that can connect you with everybody else in that community who is beneficial to you. And in my opinion, and what I train people to do is, on that tour, they should already know who you are by the kind of questions that they ask about you, the way that they make you feel comfortable in that space. And they should be preparing in their mind to introduce you to people in that community on that tour that can get you connected already, because that's what it's about. It's about making those connections. So take those tours, tour as many spaces as possible. They hopefully will offer you to stay and work a day or to come back and have a day pass. Almost all co-working spaces offer your first day free. So ask for a free trial. Or if you've got the money and you want to support them, they are also small business owners, many of them themselves, unless you're heading over to a WeWork or an Industrious or a Galvanize. But if you're shopping your local neighborhood co-working space, they could really use that 25 to 30 bucks a day. That is how they pay that community manager. And hopefully they pay them a living wage. And that's really important in our industry, because this is an industry that is 70% run by women, operated by women, staffed by women, yet still only 47% owned by women. So we want to make sure that we're supporting these small businesses so that they can be paying a living wage to these women who are running their spaces.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's a lot of small business owners that create and manage these. And then it sounded like, were those some of the big names of like WeWork? Are those more,
Yeah.
what's the right word to call those? They're not,
It's the Starbucks of co-working or the McDonald's of co-working. Yeah.
okay. So it really is a franchise kind of that, right?
There's many franchises out there. These are the giants in the industry that sort of, it's like you've got your neighborhood coffee shops and maybe you've got your favorite, and then the big behemoth shows up, Starbucks shows up on the street, right? And it's like convenient, you know exactly what's in there, you're going to get kind of the same experience every time. But it's also potentially stealing business from those other coffee shops. And that's
Okay.
potentially their business model. And I will tell you that that is the business model of many of those co-working giants.
Okay. Well,
And
that's really good to know because there are so many of us that are really passionate about shopping locally, supporting local business owners. And the pandemic was brutal for a lot of small businesses. And a lot of people had to learn to pivot. And that makes me think you didn't really change your business model during the pandemic, but you added yet another business. And this is kind of a fun, lighter mode. So is it okay if we transition to your passion for baking?
yes, yes, yes. Well, so like many mothers and parents during the pandemic, I experienced homeschooling full time. My child goes to a small school, small community school, and their goal was to have the kids off Zoom. So I was a teacher for 14 months. I was responsible for, teaching my son every day. And my industry shut down. Pretty much any industry that was in the business of gathering people together in buildings was shut down. And so I lost almost all of my revenue at the beginning of the pandemic. And in order to keep my house, and to keep food on the table, I opened a baking business. I had people I'm a baker. I've been baking since I was 5. And I had people for years ask me to sell my baked goods, but it's a labor of love. It's something that I do because it brings me joy, and it brings me joy to feed other people. But I decided, okay, well, if people tell me they're willing to pay me $10 a loaf, then I'll sell bread. And I also started making bagels because my kid was home from New York and was missing bagels and sad. And I have a college kid who was attending college in New York during the pandemic. And so I started selling bagels. And, for 2 years, I busted my bottom, working 17, 18 hours a day, while also volunteering for all of my co-working people who were facing shutdown. Families, we have a lot of co-working spaces that focus on childcare, providing childcare and being family focused spaces. And so they were hit the hardest, as you can imagine. And so I did a lot of first responder work in my industry, and mental health is part of what we focus on in our organization. So a lot of mental health support and trauma support. It was exhausting, Hillary. And, I think there's that adage, like, do what you love and the money will follow, right? If you love what you do for work, then you never work a day in your life. But at the same time, if you do what you love, if you work on your passion, you might end up not loving it. And so there did come a time when baking was, I came through the other end, and baking was a drudgery because I wasn't making enough money. And so I think that's what I want to finish this little portion on. I'm still baking, but I had, when my consulting and my coaching opportunities came back online, I did make some serious decisions and have some serious understanding that I was choosing to turn down paying clients who paid me between $150 and $250 an hour so that I could bake for 3 days to make 16 loaves of bread and 90 bagels and make less than $150 an hour in that 3 days of work. So, as
Wow.
women, right?
Yeah.
And as women who were maybe not raised to value ourselves and value our time and value what we offer people, we have to be really careful that we understand the value of our time.
Well, I really appreciate that you shared the journey and the passion. And sometimes we think, hey, I'm really good at this. I love doing it. But then it kind of outweighs the cost benefit analysis or return on investment of your precious and valuable time plus your skill set. And that kind of brings us into the next question of like challenges with life and co working and boundaries. I mean, it's not just parenting, it's not just caring for our furry children and pets, and it's not just our coworkers, but even in midlife, we specifically talk about this the challenges of self care and developing those healthy boundaries because we often do get the pushback.
Yes. Yes, yes. And as I said, this industry, this movement that I work in is staffed. 70% of the staff is women, or gender nonconforming people. And so it's really easy in these communities of care that we run, where there might be 1 or 2 people supporting 200 or more members, to not take any time for ourselves. And so we, as you know, Hillary, we run a community that has a program that's called the Resilient Community Builder. And our entire focus in that program is to support you in running your business with mindfulness and resilience and rest baked into your business model. So we now recommend that you look at your business as a seasonal business. And I recommend this to all entrepreneurs, because we are cyclical beings. As a woman, I'm a cyclical being, right? I've got these cycles every month, but all humans, all of nature is cyclical. And we have periods of high intensity output, and we have periods of high intensity rest that we need. And if we don't rest, we don't have the ability for creativity, and actually our systems start to break down. And so this idea of hustle culture is a really dangerous idea, because it's really speaking to this idea of colonial capitalism, that the human body is something to be extracted, that in order to be valued or of worth, you are extractable. And so we need to begin thinking of ourselves as inherently worthy, because we were born inside of a system that is placed on us, but actually we're here because we're meant to be here, right? That's a human system. There's a bigger system that brought us here. And so when we think about that, we really want to make sure that we're caring for that whole part of us, because when we don't fill up our cup, and I learned this during the pandemic because I collapsed about 9 months ago, but when we don't fill ourselves up, then we cannot actually give to other people. We're no longer serving people if we're serving from a place, we're attempting to serve from a place of depletion. We're actually taking from them. So the best thing that we can do is to fill our cup, is to fulfill our potential, so that then we can go ahead and serve from that overflow, so that then we can inspire others on how to fulfill theirs.
Oh, absolutely. And, I'm right there with you. There's so often that people that are caregivers and caring and community givers and carers, we sometimes allow our own health and wellness to suffer. And once we realize, well, if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of whether it's a partner or a spouse or a child or a pet or colleagues and business partners. So you and I have had several about all of these things. And in fact, I sometimes we use the oxygen mask, right? You're on an airplane and they say, in case of an emergency, you need to put your own oxygen mask on first. Well, I just got back from a mission trip in Peru, and in fact, I suffered from altitude sickness where I needed oxygen. Well, 48 hours after I was feeling better, one of my buddies I was traveling with was not doing well, and I knocked on her hotel room with my oxygen tank on wheels in tow and said, I have put my oxygen mask on. I'm feeling better. Now it's time for you to put your oxygen mask on. And we didn't share oxygen masks. Don't worry. We bought our own. And in the time of COVID, you don't share oxygen masks either. But it was just this really important reminder of that we are human beings, and there is a finite amount of time and energy in every day and in every body and soul. And so we need to give ourselves that permission to step back and recharge, so that we have more to give and are giving out of overflow and abundance, and not scarcity and depletion, when then our own physical and mental health can truly suffer.
Oh, so well said. Yes, yes. And also understanding, because we have a finite amount of energy, where do we want that energy to go, right? How do we want to, the world is pressing down on all of us right now, right? In so many ways, or the systems that we live in are pressing down on us so heavily. And while all of that is real, it's also real that there's beauty all around us. And so in every moment, sorry, which arm am I at? In every moment, we have the ability to choose how we want to feel, right? And choose where we want to put our energy. And if we throw our energy out to all the things, then we have none left. And so really understanding, and that's kind of what I was referring to around the baking too. I was putting all this energy into something that had a great story behind it. It was a story of resilience. People love my bakery story, right? But I run this bakery from my kitchen, and it's just such a story of resilience. And I stuck with it because it was that story of resilience for so long. But at the end of the day, it was a story of depletion for me. And I had to make a choice. where do I want my energy to go?
Well, what I really love that stands out to me is that we can share our stories and people want the story of resilience, but we also need to share these stories of depletion so people kind of get the cautionary tales of if you're pouring your energy out into everyone else and you're not regenerating, restoring, resting, then there is going to come a point that the body protests, and oftentimes it just shuts down for
Yeah.
sure. How are
Yeah.
you feeling now then?
I am feeling so good. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of rough stuff in the world right now, and I come from an activist background. My parents are activists, and so, I'm a person who takes action and feels responsibility for where our society is at, and that I have a responsibility in shifting things that I see need to be shifted. And I have spent since November of 2021, literally every day pouring into myself. I have a very intensive morning practice that I spend time on every day to fill my cup. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of discipline to do so. But when I didn't do that prior to, I think I'm on day 227 or 28 today of doing that, when I didn't do that, I depleted myself. So I feel great because I am building myself up every day. I'm focusing on what I'm doing well. I'm doing my best to focus on what I'm doing well instead of being that perfectionist who's focusing on what I'm not doing well, because there's plenty of things I'm not doing well. But it feels much better to focus on the little wins that I have every day, which are actually more than the mistakes that I make every day. Um, and I am, every day I'm practicing gratitude because every day I wake up and get to take a breath is a day that is a gift, because a lot of people didn't wake up today.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate and respect that you could find that kind of vital pause to say, I need to commit to caring for myself. And I think that's why you and I can relate so well and our stories resonate with each other, because we both last year in 2021 had to make some major lifestyle changes. We had to really dig into what is our physical, mental, emotional health and well being. What does that look like socially? What does that look like in our relationships, for our occupations? And you and I both made these major changes. And I hope it's an encouragement for people out there that they can try new things, they can pause, they can pivot, they can work in what seems like the best idea. But sometimes those great new ventures might look different months or years down the road. And it's important to give ourselves that permission to stop and say, I don't need to hustle like this. You know, people say, oh, I've got another side hustle. Oh, I've got all these side hustles. I'm like, well, if that works for you, that's great. That does not work for me. I need time to rest, recharge, and decompress for sure. Ah, oh, so great.
Yes, yes. And I just wanted to say one thing to that, if I could, Hillary, and hopefully you can't hear my son's audible in the background here, but um, I think that we want to really also make sure that, oh, and this is really more your ballywick. This is your zone of genius. This is what your work is in. But we want to make sure that we're really believing in ourselves every day, because this time of life, and my understanding is that your community is filled with women who are of a certain age, like my age, right? And this time of life is such a challenging time for us. And yet it's also this chrysalis. We are in this chrysalis and we will emerge from this chrysalis. And yet this is the age that women or people with a uterus are the most likely to attempt or to commit suicide. And so I just want to say that, if you are feeling like this is the end and you just can't go on, or that you're a failure, or you're looking back at your life, do everything you can to make a list of all the things that you've done well, to to fill yourself up, surround yourself with people who are rooting for your rise, even if that means leaving behind all of your friends. Reach out to me. Hillary's got my contact info. Reach out to me, because this is the prime of our lives. We are moving into the most powerful time of our lives, and yet
Yes.
we are dismissed by our societies and by the way that we are socialized, because not being valuable as childbearing people any longer, that's no longer acceptable in today's society. We need to love on grandmothers, and we need to love on these bodies that we've got, because
Yes.
honestly, it's grandmothers that allowed the human race to be who we are today.
Mm. Wow, that is a powerful statement. And I think, Iris, you know some of my story because a year and a half ago, I was suicidal and I was considering walking out on my family. And I didn't know because I didn't have the information and the resources that this is the storm of perimenopause and menopause. And there are so many solutions and possibilities and support systems out there. But we want to get that message out so that women know they are not alone going through this. And your hat, for our podcast listeners, it says more love, but there's something on there I can't read. She is beautiful. Is that what it says?
Yes, yes, it's a running series. It's a race here where I live in Santa Cruz, California, that is devoted to amplifying and uplifting mostly women, but there's a lot of men who and other genders who run in this race. And it's literally the most amazing run and 10K I've ever done, because there's an amazing rally at the beginning, and then every 10 feet along the way there's just inspirational affirmations and signage cheering us all on. So
Wouldn't that be great if we could just continue this movement of sending more love out to people?
yeah.
And certainly with Hill Talks podcast, my tagline is Hear the Love. And we
Aw.
just want people to know that there are people out here who are cheering you on, who are listening to you, who are looking for you, and who want to really embrace you. And maybe that's in a co working space.
Yes.
So, Iris, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what you are doing in your community as a leader of other co working leaders and spaces.
Thank you. Yes. So, what I do is I support people who run co working spaces. So, I support them with business best practices, and I also support them, as I mentioned, with mindfulness. My business partner is a somatic psychotherapist and opened the world's first wellness based co working space in Texas in 2008. And she focuses on supporting entrepreneurs. She's a psychotherapist for entrepreneurs. Her background was in supporting people who women and children who were in shelters um, due to trauma that they had experienced in their previous situation. And so that's her background. And then she moved into supporting entrepreneurs. So together, we provide community, we provide networking opportunities, and we provide support and business resources to women and gender diverse individuals who are running co-working spaces, because it truly is a lonely job. Even though you might be surrounded by 200 or 400 people who are amazing people and you feel so connected to your members, nobody understands what you do when you run a co-working space. And it's really important to have a peer network and a community for yourself. So that's what we provide. Um, and I don't know if I can answer anything more about that for you, Hillary.
Well, I'm just going to brag on you all a little bit in the Women Who Co-working membership space because I got to come and kind of visit, be a fly on the wall, and I felt so embraced and welcomed. And I was impressed. Let me tell you, the quality of the women who are leading these co-working spaces, they are game changers. They are global warriors. They have been consistently showing up, doing the work, being the voices for the voiceless. And the gratitude I had in just sharing that 1 hour with you all was such a gift and a treasure. So I want people to feel confident and comfortable of try something out, whether it's a co-working space near where you are, if it's one that's digital and online, there are going to be benefits to just feeling loved, nurtured, and supported. So I'm a big cheerleader and advocate for you all for sure. So
Yes, thank you, Hillary. And I'd like to mention one more thing. And that is that if you are a woman who is looking, who maybe you stayed home with kids for 40 years or for 25 years or however long you do, maybe maybe you're reinventing yourself right now for another reason. But if you are not sure what you're doing and you are looking for employment, um, I highly recommend you check out the employment opportunities at co-working spaces and tell them Iris sent you. Um, Give me their contact info if you want a hand in that. I do a lot of hiring for people, but it is my belief, because this was my experience, that re-entry moms in particular
Yes.
are the best people to hire to run a co-working space, because it's literally all of that executive functioning that you learn when you learn how to run a household that
Yes.
gives you what you need to run a co-working space. The only thing you might not have in there is the tech, because you do have to have software, you got to run that software to run that co-working space. But co-working spaces are very much in need of that person who is that mom, right? That like room mom, camp counselor, camp mom. Those are all the things that den mother, all of those. And
Teen
then
mom,
yeah,
all of
team
them.
mom, all of those. And then finally, specifically, there are women, as you mentioned, in our community who are working to change the world of work, which is built by men for men, which means that children were never invited, right? Well, if you look at humans historically, children have been with us the whole time.
Mm.
Children learned how to be adults because they played at being adults right next to the adults, whether it be pounding the cornmeal to make tortillas, right? Or learning how to be a blacksmith next to dad who's running the blacksmith shop. All of those ways were how we originally learned. And so there are women out there who are working to transform the way that work works for families, who are working to open family focused co-working where you can bring your kids, get some work done, get some play done, but maintain that connection all day long throughout the day. And those places could definitely use some grandma arms to hold some babies. So just wanted to throw that out there.
There's a place for everyone, and I think tech is probably scariest for kind of our generation. Sometimes women over 40 were dealing with anxiety and brain fog and imposter syndrome, and plus the insecurity of, well, I haven't been in a paid position for all these years. What am I qualified to do? And I want to speak to every woman listening to this. You are qualified, you are capable, and you are worthy, and you have value, and it is not necessarily based on what you've gotten paid for the last 10, 20, 30, or 40 years, however long you've taken off to spend time with your children or grandchildren. There is a space and a value in what you bring with all of this experience and expertise. Mm.
Absolutely. And Hillary, you probably know this, but there's a lot of research out there that points to moms being the best hires and the most efficient workers, because moms know how to get a lot done in a little bit of time.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think what women don't realize is that, and I think we'll see that a lot of workplaces and spaces will see we don't need you 40 hours a week because you can get everything we need you to get done in far less time. And it's the value and the output and getting it done. And so I think we're going to see a lot of transformational changes. And when we as women speak up, use our voices, use our talents, and the realistic, if we don't have women nurturing the children and taking care of things, then something's going to significantly change in society. So we need to make it a space that's warm and welcoming and possible. Yeah. Well, Iris, how can people find you? Let us know.
Yeah. So you can find me at womenwhocowork.com and or at iris at womenwhocowork.com.
I love it. I love it. And do you have any social media things
I
that people
do.
can follow?
Yeah. And I'm just going to let you know, I'm my whole self on social media. That was a promise I made to myself 8 years ago when I was removed in a Silicon Valley coup as the leader, as one of the leaders in the organization that I built, the co-working organization. And I made a promise to myself in that moment that I was going to bring my full self as the woman that I am and the human that I am to everything I did from here forth. So I'll just say that about my social media. So I'm Iris Kavanagh or Slick Iris across most social media platforms.
I love it. I love it. And I'll make sure to post some comments where people can find you and follow you and get more information. And just as a reminder, the hat that she's wearing today says more love, and she is beautiful. And Iris Kavanagh, you do bring more love, and you are beautiful.
Mm.
Body, mind, heart, and soul. You just bring it all to everything you do, and it's such an honor and blessing to get to know you and chat with you.
Aw, thank you so much, Hillary, for this time and for your energy and for everything that you're doing to make this world a softer and gentler place. I appreciate you.
Oh, you are great. Well, until next time.